hppodcraft.com.
It has begun.
You know, the true mark of wisdom, in my opinion, is knowing that you know nothing.
Yeah, I have to agree with that.
I have a basic set of facts that help guide me through the world, like, don't punch a tiger in the face, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Keeps me surviving.
Yeah.
Past that, it's just speculation. So we've made some mistakes on the show.
We have.
And we wanted to just clear some of that up before we got going today.
Right.
The last episode we did on the Nameless City, we discussed the end of it, and there was some confusion that even registered in our discussion.
Yes, yeah.
Our conclusions were wrong.
Both Chad and I had misread the exact ending. Now, it's not, it's not that big of a deal. We didn't completely miss the theme of the story or anything like that. But what was actually happening was what we said was that the creatures had like a civilization down there and they were still alive, which isn't what was going on at all.
Right.
They were the ghosts of these creatures.
These crocodile men.
These crocodile men at night would go out into the world, and then when the sun rose, they would rush back in.
Yeah, and there's some foreshadowing earlier in the story that tells you that we completely missed.
That we just didn't get. So, folks, sorry.
And in the episode before that, we also were talking, because that was co-written with Winifred Jackson.
Yes.
We were talking about how later Winifred Jackson had told Loveman, who was a friend of Lovecraft's, about Lovecraft's racism and bigotry, and that as a result, Loveman had burned all of their correspondence. It wasn't actually Winifred Jackson.
It was Sonia Green.
It was Sonia Green, who's Lovecraft's ex-wife. Also, Kenneth Haidt, who guest hosted on that specific episode, had a correction of himself. He said, the itinerant evangelist I mentioned is named Moon, not Moody. I had him confused with Dwight Moody for some reason. Oh, right, the similarity in name, message, and time period. But still.
So Ken caught
he caught his own error.
Caught his own error.
Which is a completely understandable error.
Yeah.
So there's that. Speaking of the moon, that's somewhat the subject of one of today's stories.
Yes, the Moon-Bog.
Right, but we're doing two stories today, and that comes second. The first is
The Quest of Iranon.
And so without further ado,
I'm Chris Lackey.
I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
And this is the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
hppodcraft.net.
No, God damn it, Chad. No, it's not .net. It is .com.
Into the granite city of Teloth wandered the youth, fine-crowned, his yellow hair glistening with myrrh, and his purple robe torn with briars of the mountain Seadrac that lies across the antique bridge of stone. The men of Teloth are dark and stern, and dwell in square houses, and with frowns they asked the stranger whence he had come, and what were his name and fortune. So the youth answered, I am Iranon, and come from Ira, a far city that I recall only dimly, but seek to find again. I am a singer of songs that I learned in the far city, and my calling is to make beauty with the things remembered of childhood. My wealth is in little memories and dreams, and in hopes that I sing in gardens when the moon is tender, and the west wind stirs the lotus buds.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to H.P. Lovecraft's Footloose. It's just, the only way I got through this story was by comparing it to movies.
So, in this story, it is about a golden-haired youth.
Yeah, Iranon.
He's from the great city of Ira?
Ira. And he's
Shakira?
Shakira. And he's come to this blue-collar town.
Yeah, city of Teloth.
To try and get something going. He's a busker like that guy in Once.
Well, he comes to Teloth, and he says, hey, folks, I'm going to sing you some music, man. You're going to dig it. And the people of Teloth are like, oh, okay, yeah. We're really busy working here and getting stuff done.
He kind of reminded me of Billy Zane in Tombstone. He shows up to do Shakespeare for all the cowboys, and they're all about their business. See, I told you. This actually treads over something it was much better said in Cellophane. And as we go along, I'm getting more and more appreciation for that story.
Yeah, I have to agree with you.
When he said, there are not many citizens who know what wonders are open to them in the stories and visions of their youth, for when as children we listen and dream, we think but half-formed thoughts, and when, as men, we try to remember, we are dulled and prosaic with the poison of life. Yeah. It's actually the summary of this story.
It is. It's actually absolutely the summary of the story.
Much better said in Cellophane.
Yeah, so before we really get into this is totally a rehash of Celopheius.
In a way. Yeah.
In a way,
But
and it's, in my opinion, poorly executed.
I think so, too. But as you said, the folks in this city, they're not into it.
I really kind of dig this part of the story, though,
Yeah.
because he comes in, does his music, and people, a few people are into it. Like, one or two people are into it, but everybody else just kind of wanders away. Some
Yeah.
people are yawning, because this guy kind of sucks. The next day, he stays there, and then one of the workers comes up to him and says, yeah, okay, why don't you go check in with the cobbler, because you need to get to work.
Exactly. There's these long... Well, there's these long paragraphs where they go through the songs that he sings, and it actually reminded me of when I was a kid and I read Lord of the Rings, and you'd get to those pages where it would be elf song for, since Tolkien was a linguist and he really enjoyed all that stuff, and you'd kind of just flip through to
I
get
would
to
kind
the
of
next...
skim through that stuff.
This time I read it, but I didn't enjoy it. But in these stories, he says that Iranon says he was a prince in the story, in the city of Ira, and he had to go into exile, and he spent his life looking for it again. So he's actually kind of like Aragorn.
He's not unlike Aragorn.
This returning king.
Yeah.
But as you said, he rocks it all night singing these songs.
Yeah, these lame songs.
Yeah, the morning. Iranon's got to get a jobby job. Go apprentice to the cobbler.
He's like, yeah, go apprentice to the cobbler because you need to work. Because what you were doing last night wasn't work. You lazy bastard.
And I love his response here. Iranon says, but I am Iranon, the singer of songs. I think part of the reason I didn't like this is I don't like people who frown on work. I'm kind of on their side.
I'm totally on their side. I'm an artist, but
yeah.
I relate to, obviously, Lovecraft, I think, is trying to say something about himself in this. Nobody respects his work, and
everybody expects him to do things, ordinary things,
do blue collar things, and he's not a blue collar. He is descended from blue blood.
People who appreciate beauty professionally.
The professional beauty appreciation. Yeah,
but Iranon does have a good point in one respect. He says,
"Wherefore do ye toil? Is it not that ye may live and be happy? And if ye toil only that ye may toil more, when shall happiness find you? Ye toil to live, but is not life made of beauty and song? And if ye suffer no singers among you, where shall be the fruits of your toil? Toil without song is like a weary journey without an end."
And on that, I agree with Iranon.
Yeah. You do gotta kick it every once in a while.
You gotta if you're just working to work, you gotta enjoy your life. Well, actually, one of the things that one of the workers says here is, "Oh, I'm gonna get my reward in the afterlife."
Yes. He says,
"Thou art a strange youth, and I like not thy face nor thy voice."
Which is totally. This is like Footloose or something. Like, I don't like the clothes you're wearing, son, but I will pass on some wisdom to you.
"The words thou speakest are blasphemy, for the gods of Teloth have said that toil is good. Our gods have promised us a haven of light beyond death, where there shall be rest without end, and crystal coldness amidst which none shall vex his mind with thought, or his eyes with beauty."
It is like a little Midwestern town. Work is the most important thing, and then it's the church.
Well, I think this also is a little bit of Lovecraft's attitude towards religion kind of popping up here, where it is sort of a tool to control people.
Right.
Like if you do work and you're a good person and you work really hard, when you die, you'll get all this great stuff.
Exactly.
So
stop trying to get pleasure now. Just work.
Just work and work. Yeah.
You'll get it later. So yeah, definitely.
That rang a little bell in my ear.
I liked it.
Yeah, I like that part. So of course,
and that's when Iranon goes to an abandoned barn and dances his pain away.
But he runs into this kid. This kid finds him, who was impressed with his music, and this kid's name is
Ramnad. Yeah, Ramnad. Well, Ramnad's hanging out in an embankment by the river when Iranon's walking around. Iranon's walking down the street, smoking, holding his guitar case. And Ramnad says, "Hey, I want out of this crummy town too, man. I want to go to Unai. That's where people appreciate lutes, man."
Unai is where all the people love music and art, and they're really smart and cool.
Yeah,
and they're better than everything here.
I hate to admit this, but this reminded me of the vampire Lestat at the beginning when Lestat meets Nicholas and they decide to go off to Paris together to pursue art. End of that side note. But the idea is that they're these two dreamers stuck in a wicked little town, and Ramnad says, "Hey, Unai, okay, maybe it's not what you're looking for exactly, but we won't be laughed at there."
Well, here's the thing: is Ramnad says to him, he's like, "Well, you know all this stuff, and everybody loves your music, and you're awesome." He's like, "Hey, kid, I'm not that awesome. People don't dig me so much.
Yeah.
And he, talks about how the soldiers at Jaren left him out and, all these other cities and stuff.
He talks about how he goes from city to city and he gets mocked and laughed at everywhere he goes.
Everywhere.
I have seen Stithalos that is below the great cataract, and have gazed on the marsh where Sarnath once stood. I have been to Thra, Larnek, and Cadatharon on the winding river Ai, and have dwelt long in Olitho in the land of Lomar.
So we have two references to previous stories. Sarnath, obviously, the doom that came to Sarnath, and Lomar, which was in Polaris.
Yeah. I mean, this is more of the, Lovecraft using his sort of invented history.
Yeah, he's not only just... And this is one of the really confusing things. There's a whole essay about Lovecraft in the Dreamlands, how he mixes in Dreamland stuff with ancient history.
Right.
And it's not very definite. So this could be a Dreamland story, or this could be an ancient history story.
Right.
Which would be a little strange, though, because in Lomar, they weren't human.
Well, this is prehistoric in some way.
Right.
Anyhow.
Yeah.
So it could be in the Dreamlands, it could be ancient history. In either land, the boys decide to get out of town and they hit the road together. They get into their groove of traveling, but it takes them years to get to their destination. In fact, Ramnad ages during this journey.
Yeah, but Iranon does not.
Yeah, pretty soon Ramnad is older than Iranon.
Yeah.
It's like Highlander.
Who wants to live forever?
See, I told you that's how I got through this story. So they, blah, 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 they walk, and they finally get to Unai.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a party city.
Yeah, see, and he's a little disappointed, because he thought Unai was going to be this place where people were like artists, and they appreciate art and beauty and things. But they're actually just kind of like a frat house.
Yeah, it's like a frat house, or it's like Austin city limits or something like that, They
like to rock and roll all night and party every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They definitely enjoy a good loot track. But they're also spending all their time chugging wine out of the box. So this is like Iranon wants to actually play for the pharaohs in Egypt, but instead he's playing at the Luxor to a group of a group of drunk ladies in jean shorts. That's how I imagine.
That's great.
But Iranon they do throw in flowers and they do appreciate him. He gets some respect. So he says, "All right, it's not my preferred gig, but I'll hang out here for a while." And Ramnad just turns into a total drunk.
Yeah, a drunk. He gets fat and old.
He just keeps boozing it, and then meanwhile, a group of dancers and flute players show up from the east. They've got their whole Black Eyed Peas act going on, and everybody wants to look at them. Nobody wants to listen to Ramnad anymore.
Right, yeah.
So he loses his crowd, he loses his audience, and then his buddy Ramnad. It says he dies writhing on a couch.
Yeah, which
he had the DTs, or
could be
sort of like leaving Las Vegas.
Really had the movie references to help you through.
But Iranon has remained pale and slender.
Yeah.
So, he's still in good traveling shape. So he shakes the dust of that town.
Yeah. And leaves the dead Ramnad behind, and he's still looking. He's still looking for that homeland of his.
Aira. And as he's traveling once again, he comes across an old shepherd at his cottage, and he asks him, as he's been asking everybody for years, "Have you seen this city, Aira?" The man says,
"O stranger, I have indeed heard the name of Aira, and the other names thou hast spoken, but they come to me from afar down the waste of long years. I heard them in my youth from the lips of a playmate, a beggar's boy given to strange dreams, who would weave long tales about the moon and the flowers and the west wind. We used to laugh at him, for we knew him from his birth, though he thought himself a king's son. He ran away when small to find those who would listen gladly to his songs and dreams. How often hath he sung to me of lands that never were, of things that can never be. Of Aira did he speak much. There would he ever say he once dwelt as a prince, though here we knew him from his birth. Nor was there ever a marble city of Aira, nor those who could delight in strange songs, save in the dreams of mine old playmate Iranon, who is gone."
It's not a very nice revelation for Iranon.
No.
The whole thing was fabricated.
He made it up, and he believed it so much that belief became real to him, and so real that it preserved his youth and his beauty.
Yeah, and when it's taken away from him, it's pretty sad.
"And in the twilight, as the stars came out one by one, and the moon cast on the marsh a radiance like that which a child sees quivering on the floor as he is rocked to sleep at evening, there walked into the lethal quicksands a very old man, in tattered purple, crowned with withered vine leaves, and gazing ahead as if upon the golden domes of a fair city where dreams are understood. That night something of youth and beauty died in the elder world.
And that is it.
Yeah, that's it.
That's the end of the story. I guess he was literally youth and beauty, and once that died, he aged and went off to death.
There is a lot of neat stuff in the story. It was just kind of a painful read for me.
Yeah, there was, like I said, we've touched on the things that I thought, had bits of wisdom in there. I thought were...
Yeah. Do you remember, though, this, I know, I think I've blathered on about this episode of TV before, but there was in that remake of The Twilight Zone they did in the 80s, there was a really cool episode where there was a boy who was having trouble in school, and his teacher went to his house to find out what was going on, and it turned out this boy was writing stories all day during school, and then reading them at night to his grandfather, or his father, who was very old. I think it was his grandfather. Who was like 100 years old. Yeah. And she couldn't figure out how this guy was so old, or why the kid found it so important to read these stories to him. And as it turned out, every night the kid would write a cliffhanger to his story. And he'd tell this grandfather, just wait until the next day. And that's what was keeping his grandfather alive, unnaturally, was just the power of story. Yeah. This reminded me of that, too.
I can see that, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The power of myth. Now, this story was written in February 28th, actually, of 1921. So we're now officially into the year 1921.
All right.
But it wasn't published until 35 in a magazine called The Galleon, and then reprinted in Weird Tales after his death in 39. But that's it. There's not a lot.
We had this cool thing on the forums where one of our listeners...
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah.
Regular Frank.
Regular Frank came up with this idea, which I thought this is a pretty cool idea. Yeah. And a little bit of listener participation. It is called Best Line, Worst Line. And so on the forums, if you go there, read the story before we record it. Yeah. We record usually on Sundays, the Sunday before the podcast comes out, because we need the week to edit it and put in music and things. So if you can get to the forums, you tell us what you think the best line of the story is and the worst line of the story is. But Genus Unknown he jumped on it and gave us what he thought was the best and the worst from the story.
He said the best was that last line. That night something of youth and beauty died in the elder world. His commentary being, it's such a downer ending, but so fitting and powerful. A simple, well-constructed sentence that drives home the entire story.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Worst? Oh, Ira, city of marble and beryl. How many are thy beauties? How loved I the warmth, the warm and fragrant groves across the hyaline Nithra, and the falls of tiny Craw that flowed through the verdant valley. Commentary here, Genus Unknown writes, I smell moonbeam bridges. Imagine skipping merrily through the docks in Boston talking about the cloud city that lives in your head. At first, you'll just turn a few heads. The moment you launch into, oh, cloud city, wonder of the purple sunset, how I long for thy tulip gardens, is the exact moment you move from weird looks to beaten to a pulp and left on the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's a pretty terrible... that's one of the reasons why the story was so tough for me to get through.
Yeah.
Was that stuff.
Just all of that Lord of the Rings song stuff.
Genus Unknown, thank you. Thank you for contributing. Good comments.
So let's move into the Moon-Bog, which incidentally will be read by the same reader who did the first story.
Graham Eberhardt. Who's a good friend of ours from our hometown, the Quad Cities. He lives out in Port Byron, is one half of the wonder rock group Mayhem Lettuce.
Yeah, and he's the mayor's son.
He was the mayor's son. I don't know if his mother's still the mayor, but the mayor of Port Byron.
Right.
Yeah.
But that always, to me, it just seems like you're asking for a screwball comedy when the mayor's son shows up. I don't know why. I just love that about Graham.
Somewhere, to what remote and fearsome region I know not, Dennis Barry has gone. I was with him the last night he lived among men, and heard his screams when the thing came to him. But all the peasants and police in County Meath could never find him, or the others, though they searched long and far. And now I shudder when I hear the frogs piping in swamps, or see the moon in lonely places.
This is a very promising start.
Yeah, it's a pretty creepy start. I like it.
Yeah. We learn that the protagonist knew this guy, Dennis Barry, who's made his fortune in America and so bought his family castle by the bog in the sleepy town of Kildare in Ireland. Which Lovecraft wanted to buy his old.
Yes, that was one of my notes. That was something Lovecraft really dreamed of, going back to England and buying his ancestral home. This whole idea is definitely touched upon much deeper on the Rats in the Wall, which is a story that will be coming up.
But I love that the setting is Irish.
Yeah.
It's a new thing.
Which is kind of strange, because Lovecraft hated Irish people.
Oh, did he really?
Oh, yeah. They were immigrants. He hated Irish immigrants. So
well, maybe he liked them if they stayed where they belong.
Maybe
in Banshee-haunted Ireland. Well, so Dennis is restoring the old family home, and everything was going great, but now there's some troubles. All the workers and the servants have left, and he's gotten lonely, so he's asked our protagonist to come keep him company.
Yes.
It's very much a Poe setup, actually.
Right,
But what happened?
Well, he gets there, and Dennis is like, oh yeah, you know that bog that's out by the thing? I'm going to drain it. I'm going to, because it's a mess. We could use this land for vegetables, gardens, farming, whatever. This bog is a nightmare. Let's get it out of here.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to, none of the peasants will do it because they think that there are spirits that live in this bog.
That's right. They all have some fears about the bog. What are these fears?
When I heard the fears which had driven the people from Kildare, I laughed as loudly as my friend had laughed, for these fears were of the vaguest, wildest, and most absurd character. They had to do with some preposterous legend of the bog, and of a grim guardian spirit that dwelt in the strange olden ruin on the far islet I had seen in the sunset. There were tales of dancing lights in the dark of the moon, and of chill winds when the night was warm, of wraiths in white hovering over the waters, and of an imagined city of stone deep down below the swampy surface. But foremost among the weird fancies, and alone in its absolute unanimity, was that of the curse awaiting him who should dare to touch or drain the vast reddish morass.
So, they don't want to drain it because the legend is that the person who does that is cursed.
Yeah. That's a strange legend. Like, how often in ancient times would people drain bogs?
I don't know.
But I would think that wouldn't happen. Like, I think that's a fairly modern, to be able to drain a bog, that's a lot of work.
Well, the whole reason he wants to drain the bog is because he spent time in America.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
It says America had not left him untouched.
Yeah, right.
And he hated the beautiful wasted space where peat might be cut and land opened up.
Right.
It was a funny sentiment, but then at the same time I thought, well, it is true in America we do like to destroy things that are old and replace them. It is true.
Well, I don't think that's what he's necessarily saying. I think he thinks in America there's a certain kind of practicality and business mind where it's like, this could be used for something productive,
right.
Like the very industrialized United States, as opposed to in Ireland where it's like, this is the way things are. This is the way things have always been, and this is the way things should be.
Because they're too drunk to get up and no, I'm kidding.
Oh, Chad.
You're of Irish descent.
I am of Irish
okay, good.
descent.
As long as the person I'm offending's in the room. I gotta say, if we were doing best line, worst line here, this is my choice for the worst. When he says, "When I heard the fears which had driven the people from Kildare, I laughed as loudly as my friend had laughed, for these fears were of the vaguest, wildest, and most absurd character." Throughout the story, he talks about the volume of he and his friends' laughter. And it's just some of the worst writing.
Yeah, I don't get it.
In my head, I imagine it like it's an anime movie or something, Like, he's like, "Can you believe those fears? Ha ha ha!" He's like, "Those fears are ridiculous. Ha 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 ha!" So stupid.
Yeah, it's really weird that they both laugh. Well, I mean, obviously Lovecraft is just trying to show that these guys don't take the myth seriously.
Sure, I understand.
But nobody local. So anyway, back to the story. Nobody local is going to work on the clearing in the bog.
Right.
So he has to hire some guys from up north.
Yeah, and they say basically that the peasants say that there were these secrets underneath the bog. They say there was this Greek civilization here at one time.
Right.
They've got it in some of their books, and it was overrun by invaders, but one city was spared, sort of, by its patron moon goddess. It was buried by the wooded hills around it, so that the invaders couldn't get to it. So the people were killed, and then eventually water covered it, and that's why the bog is there.
Right.
But, I mean, the saving by the moon goddess is almost as horrible as if they'd been overrun by the invaders. I mean, they were just drowned by land, essentially, by the woods.
It's pretty
which actually is kind of neat.
It's kind of...
Anyway, they've done all their laughing about these fears.
These ridiculous superstitions.
He sets up in the castle. So that night, our narrator, he dreams of flutes piping in this stately Grecian city. And the next day...
When I told this dream to Barry, we both laughed, but I laughed the louder, because he was perplexed about his laborers from the north. For the 6th time they had all overslept, waking very slowly and dazedly, and acting as if they had not rested, although they were known to have gone early to bed the night before.
So these workers he brought in from the north, they just can't get their sleepy heads out of bed.
Yeah, they're little tired babies.
And they heard weird sounds too,
yeah.
they say, when he talks to them. Dennis is just kind of ignoring this. He says, look, I'm going to drain the bog in 2 days. We've got our people from the north. I don't care if people are dreaming of flutes,
Yeah, let's get this done.
Right. That night, again, our narrator goes to sleep, and he has a dream about the flutes and the city again. But it's cut short when in his dream he sees those wooded slopes collapse in and bury everybody, leaving only one temple standing, which early in the story he says he saw this little islet off in the bog that had some ruins on it, and I'm assuming that's where that temple was.
Then I heard a clock from some remote landing below strike the hour of 2, and I knew I was awake. Yet still there came that monotonous piping from afar, wild, weird airs that made me think of some dance of fauns on distant Menelaus.
Oh, hello. Menelaus.
Yeah.
That is a reference from the tree.
Right. That's in the first line, as they say, in the groves of Mount Menelaus.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where the tree took place. So more of this bringing in his...
his
And it's cool, man, as we've gotten this thus far into the stories, now he's got enough material out there he can start drawing from his own stories and building this mythos.
So our guy wakes up, hears a clock go off, which says, oh, I'm back in the real world, I'm not dreaming, but I still hear the piping. So he looks out the window and he sees the laborers are, like, rocking it. They're out dancing as if under some kind of spell.
Yeah, they're swaying, they're doing these ancient Greek kind of dances, the Dithy Ram or whatever, and just some leaping dance I think they used to do. And he notices the laborers out there, and then he collapses back into sleep. The next day he wants to tell Dennis about his dreams, but, in the cold light of morning he realizes it must have just been autumn crickets or something like that. And he says, I'm given to phantasms anyway. Then we're at the night before the bog is going to be drained.
Yeah.
Our guy he's starting to get a little freaked out by his dreams. I mean, he wants to take Dennis's car and just get out of there, but he falls asleep instead.
Yep.
And then he wakes up again, he hears shrill piping, and there's this light coming from outside. But, not the kind of light the moon gives. Some other kind of light, like from a party or something, perhaps.
Right.
And then we get to what I think is definitely the best sentence in the story, or the best passage. It says,
My immediate actions were peculiar for such a situation, but it is only in tales that a man does the dramatic and foreseen thing. Instead of looking out across the bog toward the source of the new light, I kept my eyes from the window in panic fear, and clumsily drew on my clothing with some dazed idea of escape. I remember seizing my revolver and hat, but before it was over, I had lost them both without firing the one or donning the other. After a time, the fascination of the red radiance overcame my fright, and I crept to the east window and looked out, whilst the maddening, incessant piping whined and reverberated through the castle and over all the village.
I love that only in tales do men do the dramatic and foreseen thing. I just think that that's such a neat sentiment, when there's a reality to a situation, when a burglar breaks into the house, the quick actions that you take aren't necessarily the best ones. You might jump up and run out in your underwear, completely undefended. And I remember once when I was a kid, I heard this really loud noise and I was half asleep and I got up and I pushed my dresser over in front of my door. Then I couldn't get out of the door to see what was going on. I don't know why I did it, so it was, I thought that was a neat
Absolutely,
thing. So he looks out the window and he swears that ruin on the islet is undecayed and restored. And he thinks he sees forms dancing against him. And so he goes to the north window to get a better look, where he sees moving this procession of nightmarish beings.
Half gliding, half floating in the air, the white-clad bog-wraiths were slowly retreating toward the still waters and the island ruin in fantastic formations, suggesting some ancient and solemn ceremonial dance. Their waving, translucent arms, guided by the detestable piping of those unseen flutes, beckoned in uncanny rhythm to a throng of lurching laborers who followed dog-like with blind, brainless, floundering steps as if dragged by a clumsy but resistless demon will.
Actually, one of my favorite line of the story is towards the end of that. He says, "As last pathetic straggler, the fat cook sank heavily out of sight into the sullen pool." I just loved it. It was just some fat cook is... Even the cook, he's not even doing anything. He's just making food for people.
Yeah.
And he gets pulled in and dies in the bog.
Right, because that's what happened. It's this, Pied Piper of Hamelin situation where these bog wraiths are dancing along and everybody's doing the conga line behind them.
Come on in.
And then they all go into the bog and drown. One by one.
Yeah.
First it's just the laborers, then the servants come out of the castle.
Yes.
They're all one by one going into the water.
Right.
And he's just frozen. He actually kind of collapses on the floor with fear. But then he hears these screams from below.
All I can say is that they came from something I had known as a friend.
I'm guessing it's Dennis.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't introduce any other of his
No,
friends in the town.
so it must be Dennis.
Yeah, and then they say the next morning they find him just kind of muttering and blabbing around in a city a couple towns over.
Right.
And when he comes out, and, so he doesn't exactly remember what happened, but when they ask him, he kind of mutters about two things. He says,
As I fled from that accursed castle along the bog's edge, I heard a new sound. Common, yet unlike any I had heard before at Kildare. The stagnant waters, lately quite devoid of animal life, now teemed with a horde of slimy, enormous frogs which piped shrilly and incessantly in tones strangely out of keeping with their size. They glistened, bloated and green in the moonbeams, and seemed to gaze up at the fount of light. I followed the gaze of one very fat and ugly frog, and saw the second of the things which drove my senses away. Stretching directly from the strange olden ruin on the far islet to the waning moon, my eyes seemed to trace a beam of faint quivering radiance having no reflection in the waters of the bog, and upward along that pallid path my fevered fancy pictured a thin shadow slowly writhing, a vague contorted shadow struggling as if drawn by unseen demons. Crazed as I was, I saw in that awful shadow a monstrous resemblance, a nauseous, unbelievable caricature, a blasphemous effigy of him who had been Dennis Barry.
Oh, no, Dennis!
No!
And that is the end of the story.
And that is the end of the story. So wait, what was happening to him?
He was being drawn up into the sky.
All of the frogs are looking up in the moon.
Yeah.
And there's this beam coming from the moon.
Yeah.
But the beam isn't reflected in the water, so
No.
it's some kind of ghostly
Yes.
thing that's not real. And Dennis is being stretched and drawn up into this beam.
Yeah. Why he's taken up in the beam and not drowned in the bog with the others, I have no idea.
Because I thought the bog drowning was pretty cool.
Yeah. It's
Neat to hypnotize everybody and commit mass murder. It's not neat. I mean, it's a neat ending. I thought that was a cool...
It's pretty creepy and scary.
Yeah.
But why does he get pulled up into a moonbeam?
I don't know. Well, I was thinking of Sarnath, actually, and the beings of Ib.
Yeah.
Who were kind of frog-like.
Yeah, there was some similarities to that.
And they had descended from the moon.
Right. Well, they came in on the mist. There were some earlier on in the story, I thought maybe he was alluding to that this might be the actual site of Sarnath. You know, like in modern day.
Sure.
Because he was talking about the bond and this ancient curse and this thing that happened. And these people were drowned. And I might be stretching it. But I thought, maybe that was happening. And with the frogs, that kind of, for me, seemed to still... kind of connect to the beings of Ib.
I guess it's sort of an Irish countryside version of the doom that came to Sarnath, actually, because they offend nature,
right,
by trying to develop on this land, completely disregarding whatever heritage might be there, and as a result are punished with doom.
With doom. Yeah, I don't have much to really say about this story.
I don't know. Couldn't get into it. I tried.
Well, the whole point of this, and it kind of feels this way to me, this was written for a gathering of amateur journalists for St. Patrick's Day.
And therein lies the Irish setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was written before March 21st. There was this gathering. It was on March 10th in Boston. So Lovecraft was going to it. So he wrote an Irish-themed story, and I feel like it was a kind of a hack job, personally.
Yeah. I agree.
feel like he kind of borrowed some of his other older ideas and kind of mished them together. And...
Right. I was thinking of Darby O'Gill and the Little People a little bit. All right, well, that's all I've got on that story.
That is all I have on that story. So, everyone, I want to also point out that go to a forum, sign up, and read a story in advance and give us some input. We like that.
Thanks again for the topic, the structure, the best line, worst line thing.
Yeah,
I think that's
good
such a great idea. And this weekend I did have an opportunity to go through some of the forums and the comments and read what everybody's writing about. It's just great stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff. And I would remind everybody also that we've got that donate button on our site.
Oh, yeah, please donate.
HPPodcraft.com. If you donate $20 or more before the end of the year, we will send you a soundtrack CD.
Yes.
Which covers, it's about 70 minutes worth of music, original tracks that we've put together for the first 19 shows.
Yeah, this is the 20th show.
This being the 20th show.
And that's, if you think about it, that's $1 a show.
Yeah, it really is.
Show, yeah.
And we haven't printed the CDs yet, so if you've donated, you'll get yours probably near the end of the month.
And if you can't afford $20, $5.
Yeah, whatever.
$5 would help. Whatever you can give.
We'd really appreciate
It
it.
would really help us out with
help
our
us
server
with-
costs,
exactly.
and we're not making any money on this. We're just trying to break even. So,
Next week, we are doing a big one,
The Outsider.
The Outsider, which I very much so like.
Right? Yeah. Well, I liked the film adaptation of this, which I thought was pretty good, with Tom Cruise and Patrick Swayze. Did you see that? Because I haven't read the story yet, but
No, you're right.
Yeah, Pony Boy.
Pony Boy,
Yeah, yeah.
sure.
That's pretty
Sure.
good.
Well, next week, Chris is in for a big surprise.
But, I'm looking forward to reading
Or
this.
he may be over at the S.E. Hinton literary podcast. We'll see what happens. But that's all for now. I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
I'm Chris Lackey.
And this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
hppodcraft.com.
Thanks, folks.
hppodcraft.com.